Okay, so this this is the first video for the World Open tournament that took place in the first week of July. I played in the under 2200 section, and in the first round, I was paired all the way up to the highest rated seed in the tournament, Maelstrom Fonseca. So in this game, I had the white pieces, and I played e4, and we get the Nimzovich defense with knight c6, which is a very uncommon move. Um, so for this tournament, I tried not to review my games with the chess computer until after the tournament. So I started to analyze this game. I looked at this one with the computer, and there were some small instances during the tournament that I did look at some games. Not all the way through, but some specific moments I would set up position just to look at some endgame, or maybe I would look at the opening a little bit just so if it happened again later on, I would know what I was doing. So this game, I have a fairly good understanding of what the computer will say. Um, but I thought for the way that we can do uh, most of these games is I will analyze first, explain what I'm thinking without the chess engine, and then at the end turning it on, going through it very quickly a second time to check what I'm thinking. I think that that might be a good way of analyzing. So knight of 3, d6. Now I play d4, controlling the center squares. Knight of 6, and now I play the move d5. And the move d5, um, I think it's a good move. And the idea is, okay, yes, this pawn will eventually be undermined by either c6 or e6, but I'm gaining a lot of time because the knight needs to now go back to b8, and in the amount of time it will take for black to get this knight back out, it will be the decision to play d5 and have the pawn be undermined. I could just either take on c6 or e6, whichever pawn is pushed, and I should have achieved enough time to justify the decision to maybe overextend my pawn in the middle. So, knight back to b8, bishop d3, just developing the bishop to a natural square, defending the pawn. g6, castles, bishop g7, rook e1, castles, and now this move c3. Okay, potentially more ambitious would have been the move c4, just taking the center, I develop my knight behind the pawn. Um, Maybe eventually I can play b3, bishop b2. It's a little difficult with the bishop on this long diagonal, looking at my rook. But it would be more ambitious to play this way because it's gaining space. But in the game, um, c3, I liked what it did for my position. So one idea of c3 is to blunt the dark square bishop on the diagonal, right? So this pawn on c3 is making it so the bishop doesn't have as much scope on these three squares. Whereas if it's on c4, the bishop has a target on b2 to hit and potentially a rook on a1. Another reason, in the game, my opponent played a5, um, which I think is maybe a slightly inaccurate move because now I get to play a4. My pawn on c3 makes a lot more sense. If it was on c4, then pawn on a4 might not be so good because it would leave a hole on the b4 square. Um, so a4, knight a6, knight a3, and c6. So c6 is probably the move that should have been played earlier instead of a5. Likely c6 should have been played here, just immediately get start undermining my center. I probably would have just taken it, potentially takes with the knight, maybe takes with the pawn, could be a move, but okay, let's say takes with the knight, and now I can just develop and play this position, and I'm still ahead in development by a little bit, and the center is more in my control. If e5, I get to play as the backward d6 pawn. If e6, d5, you might be left with an isolated d pawn. So I was happy with the position up until this point, and now after c6, I decide I should take it with the idea of playing e5. So I started looking at this line, takes, takes, e5, and I thought the knight had to go back to d7. Well, if the knight goes back to d7, then I can take on d6, and I get to play against these hanging pawn structure. But if the knight goes to d5, I thought I had to move bishop e4. So in the game, takes, e5, and my opponent actually did play the move knight d5. So I thought here in this position that I would have the move bishop e4. Bishop e4 looks a little bit strange, um, either before or after throwing in the capture. In the game, I threw in a capture. Now bishop e4 here um, attacks the knight, and the knight is pinned to this pawn. So the knight, in order to move with defense of the pawn, would probably need to go to e7, and then I could play bishop g5 and maybe provoke a move f6, which should be a weakness for black, also blocking this bishop. So I play bishop e4, and here in this position I realized that yes, there's the move knight c7, and I started looking at strange ideas, which I ended up playing. So I looked at the move knight b5 there. So we'll put this position on the board here. I looked at the move knight b5, and I sort of couldn't. It was hard to contain myself as I wanted to play this move very badly, because it's just a beautiful looking move, and it's one of those moves that could just make the black position sort of fall apart. Essentially, the knight on d5 is protected by the knight on c7, and if the knight on c7 ever moves, then the d5 knight can be captured, and black will be left with a terrible structure. These two pawns in the middle, the d5 pawn will probably drop, and the d6 pawn to follow. The knight at the same time is pinned to this pawn on c6, and the rook on a8 as well is being x-rayed. So the move knight b5, if the pawn takes, then I get to take twice on d5. I'm hitting the rook and the b5 pawn. I'll show you this line. So knight b5, this is the move I ended up playing. If knight takes b5, then I simply take back on b5, and I am threatening to take on d5 twice. I'm threatening to take on c6. Black's position is falling apart. If pawn takes b5, then I can take on d5. And if you take back the bishop on d5, queen takes d5, rook needs to move because it's attacked, but I have enough pieces to now take on b5, and I'm up a pawn. a5 pawn is under pressure. I can support my pawn with c4 potentially if needed. Knight d4, this d pawn is backwards. This position will be, I think, very good for white as well. In this position, there is the move rook b8, but I will likely be able to win this a pawn, and I still have the bishop in the middle of the board. So there was a lot in this position that I felt was going my way, and I would have been happy with this position as well if it occurred. So in the game knight c7, knight b5, a third move, which I thought was better than either of those moves, which is bishop b7, was played. And after bishop b7, I considered just taking knight on c7 immediately. I considered developing my dark square bishop to g5. And I started looking at a very strange idea. After bishop g5, I had determined that any piece blocking on f6 would be beneficial to me. For example, if knight blocks on f6 walking into a pin, let's just look at these positions on the board. If the knight blocks on f6, then I had determined that the d6 pawn is hanging. So that is not a move that can be played. If the bishop blocks, then I had determined that the bishop's, the dark square bishop trade is something that white is looking for. Particularly because the king will be weaker, and I still have pressure on the queen side with this knight on b5. So I can start to think about taking everything and just piling up against this d pawn. So I just thought I could trade queen takes, and I could play this position, potentially bringing the knight back to d4, but also just trading, forcing the knight to a passive square. And this position seemed good for me. I can consider a move like queen d4. I'm not sure exactly what I would have played here, but this move does threaten to go fork over there, and the queen is hit, so likely a trade will need to occur. Potentially trading and playing d5 will allow the c5 square. So you can imagine a line that looks sort of like this. I can just retreat the bishop, probably to c2, but potentially even to f3, keeping pressure on this diagonal. And I thought that white was doing well here. This bishop is sort of behind the pawns. The knight can come to e6, but I wasn't worried about this position at all, and I thought if anyone was better, it should be white. So queen d7, because all the blocking moves. f6 also just a weakness. I can just retreat the bishop, potentially to h4, g3, put more pressure over here. I'll throw in taking on c7 so I don't lose a knight, but yeah, it felt like this move should be included. Queen d7 I thought was the main move. And in this position, before I played bishop g5, I was looking at taking the knight, which I did. Knight takes d7 as not to allow the isolated pawn on d5. And now I was looking at a very strange move from afar, which is bishop e7. Bishop e7 would be a fork on the rook and the pawn if the queen could not take it. The queen can take it, and I was looking at bishop takes c6, hitting the bishop, hitting the queen, and potentially winning my piece back. Unfortunately, there is the move knight e6 in that position. So if we look at this, right here, knight e6, defending the bishop, and black is now up a piece. So I saw that, but still felt that bishop g5, knight takes c7, and then queen d2 makes a lot of sense for my position. It's very harmonious setup, because now the queen and bishop are prepared to go to h6, trade off the dark square bishop, which is a very important minor piece for black's king safety. The knight on c7 is passive. The bishop on b7 is um, it's passive right now because of this pawn on c6. The only way to fix it would be to play c5, which would create weaknesses in black's position. So I felt pretty comfortable in this position. d5, in the game, I felt that d5 was a little bit premature. I thought that black should, even though c5 immediately is not possible, and also maybe not positionally desirable, I still felt like black should keep the option open to eventually play c5, d5. In the game, after d5, this bishop has two pawns in the way from becoming an active piece. After bishop c2, rook fe8. Rook fe8, I felt that the purpose of it was to, on bishop h6, not to be forced to trade. Maybe bishop h8 could be played, or bishop f6. I played bishop h6, and I was thinking that my opponent would do one of these moves. If bishop h8, my plan was just to retreat the bishop to e3, and force the trade of the bishops on d4, or potentially just playing against these weak dark squares on the queen side. In the game, though, my opponent played c5, which I felt was not an accurate move. You're trying to... I understood that the idea was to play d4 and get some play with this light square bishop, but my initiative comes very fast, which I actually didn't see in this position. I took on g7 because there's nothing else that makes sense given my previous plans. And now I started to think, and I thought for a while about a few different moves. I thought about just bringing rook to the d file. I thought about playing like h4, maybe h3, some move to give some lift to the king. But then I saw this move knight e5, and it became clear to me after looking at it just for a little bit of time that it's a very strong move. The queen, first of all, only has 3 squares that can be considered: d8, d6, and c8. So one of those moves should be played. And the first thing that I realized that made me really want to play the move knight e5 is that on queen d6, I have this move queen h6 check. So let's just put that on the board. Knight e5 I did play. Queen d6, there's the move queen h6 check. Sacrificing the queen to force the king out, which I will then be able to take on f7, winning a pawn, taking the queen back with a fork on the bishop and rook. So I saw this this move, realized that queen d6 was not possible, which meant that knight e5, an active looking move, forces the queen to either c8 or d8, and I felt that that would be very, very beneficial inclusion for me. So in the game, my opponent played queen c8. Queen d8, I thought I would maybe have queen f4, hitting the pawns, and then maybe, or even just knight g4 on queen d8, going into h6. So that was my plan. So queen c8 prevents knight g4, but does not prevent queen f4. And now my main line went queen e6, and then I thought that I would just play a move like h4, which the point of queen e6 is that my knight can't move to, let's say, g4, because there will be a pin along the e file, and I will get checkmated on e1. So I would just make Luft with h4, start to take apart the king side. My bishop is a useful piece in any sort of attack. My rook can be lifted. This rook is good to sit on the back rank to just stop preventing any checks. And my position should be very good. My opponent plays a 5 now, which felt not super accurate, but it wasn't a move that I was anticipating. So now I needed to think about what I am going to do in response. Initially, I wanted to play rook e3 to build the position, bring the rook up and over, start to threaten these sorts of mates. But I realized that the most natural move for black is knight e6, attacking my queen. And if I play rook e3, knight e6, I have to move my queen away. Potentially, even move like d4 is possible. If I play rook e3, there's also this idea of playing d4, pawn takes, and then just playing knight d5 with a fork on my queen and rook. So rook e3, while tempting, I decided is not the most accurate way forward. Instead, I thought, okay, after knight e6, my queen is going to go probably to h4, potentially g3, but likely h4. So I can either play rook e3 and then queen h4 once it gets hit, or I can prophylactically play queen h4 in anticipation of knight e6, which is what I did. So queen h4, I was happy to find this move. In the game, my opponent did not play knight e6, which I thought was basically the only move. Instead, queen d8. And now I have the option to either trade the queens or keep the queens on with queen g3. I choose to keep the queens on because I have a lot of pressure. And I saw that after queen f6, I would have the move knight takes g6, which would be, if black captures, I'm hitting the knight on c7. So you can see queen g3, queen f6, then I'll have knight takes g6. Winning tactic. And in the game, after queen g3, my opponent did play the move queen f6. And I sort of did a double take because my opponent's a national master. Yes, a little bit below 2200, but still a national master player, which is my goal to achieve. So, okay, knight takes g6. I think for a little bit of time, I play knight takes g6. My opponent doesn't immediately do something, so it feels like, okay, I did something. I have successfully won a pawn, and I will be forcing something more at this point, because if you don't take my knight, then I'll be able to come back with a check to h4, take on f5. So those lines never work. If you take back, I'll be able to take on c7 and then take on c5, which is, I think, the best that black has at this point. The position is sort of falling apart. Yes, I could go into this endgame up one pawn, but I would rather be up two pawns. Takes on c5. And now my position is winning. The position is completely winning at this point because I'm up two pawns. Black doesn't really have any compensation to speak of. I have control over the e-file. My queen is very active, pressuring all these pawns. Maybe move like rook c8 can be played. I will just maybe move back with a check, and eventually I should be able to convert this position. My opponent plays rook takes e1, rook takes e1, rook e8, trying to be tricky. If I take on e8, queen takes e8. If I then do a fork on c7, just the king will move, and then if I take the bishop, there will be a checkmate on e1. So I take once, and now I do not fork and take the bishop. Instead, I play queen e3, and now I'm two pawns up in an endgame. The bishop endgame is going to be winning. The queen endgame should be winning. Queen c6. Now it's time to break up the team over here. If I can just break up these pawns on this side of the board, then the weaknesses will be too much for black to defend. My bishop and queen will be an excellent combination in order to give a checkmate. King f7. The idea here is to play d4, which would threaten mate and also the queen. So the reason d4 cannot be played here is because I take the pawn with check. King f7 threatens to play d4. I just play f3 to blunt the diagonal. These are the only two pieces that I have to worry about, and they're all lined up on this diagonal. So the move f3 works against both pieces. Bishop to a6. h5 now. After takes, bishop takes, queen c4 is sort of a resigning move because now my bishop and queen will be able to deliver checkmate. I start with queen e6. Now we're on move 36. I don't have that much time, so I decide to repeat the position one time by force. After king e8, queen back to e6, the king must return to f8, otherwise there will be a mate on d7. And now I play the move queen d6. This is move 39. I make my final move, bishop e6, and I now have reached the time control, and my position is completely winning. Queen e7, king g6, queen f7, king g5, queen f5. Uh, this is uh, the final moment of the game. After king h4, the very precise queen f6 forces the king to go to g3. And after queen g5, black will be forced to play queen g4, lose the queen, and therefore the game. So in this position, my opponent resigned. So I played the top seed in the under 2200 section, scored a win. A very convincing win, I want to say. And I was feeling very good after this game. I don't want to spoil how the rest of the tournament went, uh, but will see that you'll see that in the coming videos. So let's now turn on the engine, return to the beginning of the game, and just quickly go through the key moments. So starting with d5. D5 is a good move. It's not listed as a top move. It's a book move. It's been played. White, I would imagine, scores fairly well with d5. Yeah, d5 is the best scoring move for white in this position. Not like it matters that much, but uh, it's a good move. Knight b8. The bishop comes out. Castles. Bishop e7. e1. All these moves. Okay, c3. So yeah, c4, more ambitious plan. The move h3 being recommended, bishop g5, all these are moves. c3 is still an advantage for white, and it created the character of the position that I was looking for that allowed for this more original sort of thinking, these more uh, unique ideas to occur, all thanks to this c3 move. So I'm happy with the move. A5, a4, knight a6. All of these moves are standard. And now here, after e5, e5 is the only move for white to really try to play for an advantage at this point. Um, Here, it looks like knight d4 potentially would have been a little bit more accurate than taking. But the only reason that it's more accurate is because after takes, there's this move queen takes d6, which I personally didn't consider. This is a move that I should um, start to consider these sorts of captures. The reason I didn't consider it is because it sort of looked like, okay, you're giving yourself this isolated c pawn by choice. You're walking into knight c4 with a tempo, potentially hitting a5. The e pawn is, my rook's already on e1, so your e pawn is sort of hit. It felt like there were many reasons that queen takes d6 was not a good move, and so therefore, if queen takes d6 is not a good move, then taking on d6 is a good move. But it looks like my opponent nor I saw this continuation. E takes was played, which allows this very, very strong move. I would give this an exclamation point as a move. The bishop e4. It's the best move, and it causes some serious problems for black. So after knight c7, the move knight b5 is not given. I can just play knight c4. I'll have a very strong initiative against the d6 pawn, sort of pinning the knight to this pawn. It's very unpleasant for black to try to play. Knight b5, though, is also a good move. It doesn't throw away the advantage. Okay, bishop b7, bishop g5, or knight takes c7, or to play bishop g5, this is the correct plan for white. So bishop g5, queen d7, all the blocking moves. Bishop f6 is a fine continuation, but this trade of the dark square bishops, I don't think, is what black is looking for. I can either take on c7 or take on f6. The position should transpose. The knight has a recapture here, and then I can play this position. It's not. This is what we were looking at with queen d4 here in the other move order, but it's a similar thing. Here is where I said I felt that I wasn't going to be that much worse. Maybe bishop c2 or bishop f3 were my moves. Bishop f3 is, I think, what I had landed on. But black, I think, needs to play pretty accurately in order to do okay. The c5 square is weak. If c5 right now, you're sort of overextending, you're giving a bunch of squares. So this position would be very difficult for black to play. This is probably what I would have gone for. But it's the queen d7, takes on c7, takes on c7, and queen d2. d5 is a fine move. I thought it was a little early, but okay, it's fine. I was looking at maybe knight e6 or rook e8. All moves are playable. Rook e8 now, bishop h6, and c5, potentially the best move, but allows white to get this initiative after bishop takes g7, king takes g7. Important move, knight e5. After knight e5, the machine seems to think that queen d8 is the way to go. I was looking at the move queen f4 there to play this move, but now after queen e7, it's similar to what happens in the game. I would probably play a move like h4, but now the e6 square is free for the knight, so black is in time to play knight e6. This is important because in the other line, after queen c8, queen f4, queen e6, I can play h4, and there's no knight e6. So this is the key difference. In this position, though, my opponent played f5, which is the only other move that doesn't allow mate or some winning of significant material. Queen h4 is a good move. Queen perhaps should be on g3, though. This is something that I learned because the pawn, as the other main move in the position shows, pawn should be on h4 in order to break up the team, these pawns here, and the king will be weaker. This is what happens in the endgame. Here I can just do it in the middle game with queens on the board. Well, the queens were on the board then too, but more pieces on the board, h4, h5. This probably would have been slightly superior. Queen d8, though, definitely keeping queens on the board with queen g3 is a good try. And then queen f6 is just the blunder. After knight takes g6, I'm going to win this game now. Takes, queen f7, queen takes c5. I'm up 2 pawns, and the rest of the game is not really, yeah, takes, queen e3 is fine, bishop d3. Any move that doesn't allow checkmate should be winning. H4 f3. The rest of the game is sort of irrelevant. It's just, how do I find checkmate? I find a pretty fast mate. So that was the first game. Pretty accurate game. I'm very happy with the way that it turned out. I don't think that there were any clear mistakes from me. So at this point in the tournament, I was very happy with the way I was playing. So yeah, this was a new way of sort of reviewing where we go over the game and then turn on the machine for a quick pass through. Let me know if you like that sort of method of approaching the analysis. I think it will make for a little bit more interesting analysis because I'll be, without the, you'll get my raw thoughts without me having looked at the computer. In previous games from Eastern class, I had looked at the computer for those games before reviewing them on the videos. But this one I had also looked a little bit at the computer, but going forward, the rest of the games I've not really looked at the computer, so that should be very interesting to analyze. So yeah, stay tuned for the next video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next one.